All right, today we're going to look at the PSDS platform, New Grid. And for those of you who are current users, you can continue with the old grid. This new features, I think you'll find pretty attractive. What we've got going on here, as you can see in the grid down below, symbol description, that's the same, but now it's 3-year standard deviation and APR and the 3-year optim, which is our PSDS allocation. That's the algorithm we patented for an optimum level, balanced equation. And then your current input. You can toggle also between 3, 5, and 10 as the data comes in. That brings up another issue. Now you see, because we've created Optum, we're pulling the data directly from a scan and importing it directly to the grid page. It's also on the scan report, but it's now on the grid page here too. And down below, you can see we pull from the scan the optimum standard deviation, APR, and Sharpe ratio, as well as your user input. So that's information from the grid, from the scan that is now on the grid. So real quickly, you'll see up here we've got a new stress test and we've got these flow analysis. Let me just run through an example and give you a quick look. So we'll grab 5 things up above from a grid. Let me see, make this simple, 5 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll add them to the portfolio below. And now I'm just going to spread them evenly. So you can see this is a 3-year standard deviation in return for Vanguard Energy. If I go 5, 10, it changes with it. The optimum is blank because the scan hasn't been run yet. Right now, it's showing in dollar terms. But if I hit the spread reset, it'll go to percentages. Depends on what you want to look at it. If I had no dollar amount in here, it would stay at percentages, and then I'd have to say, okay, what if I put another dollar amount in? 100,000, a million. And spread reset, that's $200,000 in each position. So that's controlled by you. If you imported dollars, all you have to do is sum it, and it will sum all of these and total them right here. And then you could change it to percentages back and forth. So let's look at percentages. You're in percentages and you want to see the cash flow on this 5 positions to say, what is the current dividend interest distribution rate if you had an evenly spread portfolio with these 5 things? Estimate cash flow, simple push the button. In about 5 seconds, it gives you a number, 3.53%. For that same portfolio, if you had a static look, say for the last 10 years, if I built this portfolio, left it alone for 10 years, what would the return have been? The estimated portfolio value for the last 10 years, push that button. Because we're in percentages, it's going to show you the results in percentages. There you go, down 39%, and it ended at up 141% or up 41% for that period. If we preferred dollars, we hit the spread reset, and then we could calculate it by hitting EPV 10, and it would display in dollar terms. Same information, but now a $1 million portfolio went down to 600,000 and is up to 1,400,000. A little more dramatic and a little more relatable. Oh, that's how much money I could have in the volatility of that portfolio. Now you can also say, I'd rather just look at a specific year, and we see in this year it's down 9.8%. What year is that? 15. So if I just pushed in 2015, sorry, right here, and pushed estimated portfolio value, what would it have done in 2015? It just gives us that one period, down 84%, or 84,000, or 8.4%. So you can see individually by year or for 10 years. And so the grid now is laid out that way. In addition to that, if I had this portfolio, I said, with this portfolio, I actually want to be able to pay out, $5,000 a month. And that's $60,000 a year. So I can say, I want to pay out and I want a reserve bucket. I'm going to set that aside as cash. That's my distribution. So let's say I want to have 2 years of cushion. So I might put 2 times 60,000, $120,000 right here. That's the distribution bucket. And I'm only taking 60, so the divisor is 2 years. So I've got a cushion of 120 in cash, but I'm only distributing 60. So I divide it by 2. Down here, that $1 million will actually, instead of being $1 million, it's million less 120,000, so $880,000 is. Now I just spread it, percentages, and there's the dollar amount that's in. And now that I'm in dollars, I can run a flow analysis with this distribution. Now, the portfolio itself right here needs to feed into your reserve bucket. Otherwise, you're just going to drain that to zero and you can't make distributions out of it. So how much are we each year going to take from our portfolio to replace the money we took out of money market? So let's Well, let's say we're going to do 6%. And it's dynamic, which means it's going to be 6% of the portfolio's value at the end of each year, not static, which would have been a fixed 6% based upon the starting value of the portfolio. Once I've done that, the question is, can I sustain this distribution with this portfolio? I hit the button, and with that set of parameters, it says, let's look at the flow. I was down 397,000. That included the transfer to the bucket. Remember, I had to replace. We had 120. We sent out 60. That's the income. We brought 52,008 back in. There's the bucket. The next year we were up, down. This is the portfolio and what the value of that portfolio is. We started out with 880,000, and at the end we ended up with 675,000. However, we have 120 in cash. We drained that down. It kept going down, 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 but it started building back up to 84,000. So we were able to distribute $420,000 from the bucket over that 10-year period, which means we weren't able to send the 60,000 each year. The red doesn't mean you've lost money. It just means it's below the $60,000 you need to make a distribution. So we didn't make a distribution. So it says we're not achieving our goal here. So now, quite simply, you can say I can rework the portfolio, build a better portfolio. You could say, it's not reasonable with this portfolio for us to sustain that distribution. What if I increase my transfer rate to 8% and I ran it? Well, that's a pretty high transfer rate, but it might solve the problem. You can quickly find out. And it does, except for 1-2 years. But also, your value of your corpus is dropping. At the end, you've got 545 plus the 44,000 in your cash bucket. So maybe it's more reasonable to say, 100,000. All right, I'm going to spend $50,000 a year. I'm going to push this back to 6, and because of that, I now have $900,000 invested. Spread, reset it back to 180. So now, if I cut with this portfolio, my income requirement on it, I'm only going to take out 50,000 a year instead of 60, and I'm going to do the same 6% transfer rate. So we're trying to solve this puzzle. Again, one of the simpler things to do and the harder things is what we get paid for is to redesign the portfolio. But if that portfolio is the portfolio the client has to stay with, we're trying to find out how can you stress this portfolio and still meet their income requirement. What's reasonable? And you can see we did a little better here. So maybe if we went on this to 7% on the transfer rate, will it achieve it? And almost there. But again, 621 and 86, our total value is just over 700,000, and we're starting with 900 plus our reserve bucket of 100,000, $1 million. So we're kind of going backwards here over time. This tells me this portfolio should be redesigned, but that's all done with the system, and you can quickly on the fly do these things. So that's the new grid, and that's the functionality of these buttons. I'll delete all these rows, and now let's go back to a different portfolio. And let's look at one that we've already pre-designed and say, okay, let's say the same assignment is to run one of these and add to portfolio, and we're having the percentages. We've got the dollar amount. We're going to spread it. That's the investable side. The same thing. Let's cut this back to 5%, and we run the same analysis. With this portfolio, could I take $1 million, pay out $50,000 a year, have a cushion of 100,000, 2 years of income, and still grow the account? And you can see, okay, we were down 113. That included the transfer of $45,000 out of here into the bucket. The first year we dipped, we kept. We still were able to make our distribution of 50,000, and then we slowly started to build our cash bucket back up. And at the end, we had $130,000 in the cash bucket, still covering 2 years of distributions. We made $500,000 in total distributions over the 10-year period, and our portfolio value went from invested $900,000 to $1,329,000. So that tells me this portfolio is better designed for distribution and income. And indeed, I probably could pay out a little bit more. And as time goes on, because my portfolio values increased, I could rerun this with a higher distribution and sustain it. And that's the kind of analysis we can do on the fly very quickly. The next time we come in here, I'm going to run some scans, this new stress test, and show you the delivery of the report directly to the grid instead of on the processing page. I hope this was helpful, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks a lot.